Hello, it's Dave March on Land of the Confusion again, and we're this week we're interviewing Vance Richards, and here's my
Yay.
co-host.
Hi, I'm Don Tillman, sidekick. And Palo Alto, California. It's a slightly chilly day, a little overcast, but otherwise just fine.
And by chilly, he means it's like 82 degrees out.
No. Okay, it says 59. No, it can't be right. Hold on. Yeah, 59. Okay. Don't hate me.
Well, no. We understand that you get, in exchange for this sunny weather, you get to live in sunny, beautiful, overcast weather. You get to pay exorbitantly high taxes.
Okay.
I get that.
Yes.
Except with cold weather.
So it all evens out. So here we're speaking of Vance, who's been on Ricochet for, when did you join Ricochet roughly?
In the beginning, not like 2010, I think it was like September of that year. It wasn't one of the originals, but pretty close. Okay.
Not like a founding member with your special badge like Don here.
Well, I do have that, but
oh, okay.
I think I went in that year, I think it's.
Okay. Well, I mean, we all know the tales of Don here being personally signed up by his neighbor. Peter Robinson came over and like, Don, you have to sign here on this thing so I can get my website going.
It's not actually true, but he is my neighbor, and I do see him occasionally. And when my dog died last year, but before then, going on dog walks, I bumped into him a few times.
He always comes across like quite the gentleman.
Yeah, he's exactly the same. And
I know, like
exactly the same.
When like Romney was running, and you could tell, like hearing him, he didn't like Romney. But instead of saying like, "What are you excited about this squish for?" He'd be like, "Help me understand."
Yeah, it's great. But yeah, a little bit.
Okay, so Vance, you mentioned in your bio you grew up in New Jersey, which you said was not as bad as you think, but in a lot of ways worse. What do you mean? What did you mean by that?
In Jersey, it's got a bad rep. There's a lot of nice towns, a lot of nice places.
I got to ask, which exit?
Which exit? I don't know. I'm not really. I grew up like 163, but now I'm sort of further away from the Parkway. So, North Jersey. It's always crowded. And since becoming a homeowner years ago, property taxes are just killer. I have a nice small house. We're getting to where pretty soon my mortgage payment, the tax will be more than the loan.
Wow.
So are you still in Jersey?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Job elsewhere.
Yeah, you mentioned you you left Jersey one time to chase down a woman. Where did you end up going?
My wife, we met at work, and she had already been planning to move to the West Coast. She'd been out there. And so she moved, and I quit my job, took whatever I could fit in my car, and drove across country and showed up on Valentine's Day. I was really pushing for that.
Sweet.
Usually a good story. Anyway. Yeah, so it was February, so obviously Valentine's Day. So you never know. First 3 days were good. That last day, going over a mountain pass in Oregon, and I couldn't even see a road. I saw tire tracks from the truck that went, so I just followed his tire tracks. So if he went off the cliff, I would have gone off the cliff.
Yep.
It was all worth it because we've been married for 20-something years now. So
beautiful.
Yep. And where did you end up on the West Coast? So you're in Oregon then?
I was in Seattle.
Okay.
Oh.
Which I really liked. And when I look at the news now, I don't regret that I'm not there anymore.
Oh. When you're happier to be in New Jersey than you are to be in Seattle, that's
we had a couple riots when I was out there with the WTO, and that was pretty surreal because I was at IBM, so I wore a suit and carried a briefcase, and I had to walk home because all
It's like a target on your back.
and go down to one street. I can't go any further because the police are blocking the road. Next street, same thing. Third street, there's no police, but then people are like breaking things, and they sort of cut back another street, and there's tear gas. So I just people get out of hand sometimes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just when they want to.
Sad.
We're seeing that this year.
Man.
Well, we got to see yesterday the new Biden was so loved and beloved by the progressive voters of Seattle and Portland that Antifa rioted in the streets.
Yeah, people all thought that was a reaction to Trump, but obviously.
Like, oh, they hate everyone. They want to overthrow the government and replace it with an anarchist-free state, or an anarcho-communist state. I'm not even too sure how it will work. And I guess when we saw the chats, we saw it became pretty much warlordism pretty quickly.
Yeah, and this is I really fail to see the advantage of not arresting these people. I just don't see the advantage of it. Apparently there is some political advantage to not arresting them. I just don't know what it is.
Yeah, it makes no sense. Now that they're complaining about Biden, maybe they'll start arresting.
Well, Dawn, as a great lover and tradition, I take it you must have watched the inauguration yesterday.
No, I didn't watch it.
I mean, 25,000 armed troops surrounding the Capitol. I mean, that was like a daring display of like, it told everyone in the world exactly what this administration is based on.
Yeah, for folks tuning in, we're doing this on Thursday.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's pretty strange scene there. It's pretty surreal. Like apparently no attendees at all.
Yeah.
Just invites to families and special guests and stuff.
And they put
That's
flags
just weird.
on the wall just so it wouldn't look empty.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's.
They put out twice as many chairs as was needed. So it made it even look worse than it was.
And my favorite was we can put a link in there. When Biden was after the ceremony, Biden was greeting folks. He was apparently wearing an earpiece, so people were telling him what to say.
Mm-hmm.
And he walked into this building with a Marine on each side of the door, and so he just repeated what was going into his earpiece, which was "Salute the Marines." So you can hear him say "Salute the Marines" as he's walking in.
Wow. I thought the Marines were there to prevent him from falling over.
He says "Salute the Marines" as he's walking in. Oh.
I just don't get how that's who they ended up with after the primary. They had like 20-something people. I think everyone was waiting to get to the left, and they thought maybe he'd be more centrist or something. I don't know, but
well, the fact that there were 27, 28 people.
Yep.
Means that the regular party organization is broken because you can't even physically have debates with 27 people.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just broken. And the internal party or whatever power struggle going on there, I don't know what it is, but clearly from the results, they said, okay, we're going with Biden. and
Bernie Sanders, he's like, he'd be horrible.
Yeah.
At least he's sincere and he's coherent.
he is sincere and coherent. He'd be horrible, but he's not connected with the party. He's not actually in the party.
He used to be an independent.
Yeah, he's never even he ran for the party. He didn't even buy a membership or register. Right. Like in my country, you have to buy a membership to run for a political party.
That'd be the minimal effort I think you should make. But he didn't. It's not about who's running. It's the people controlling the party. And they figured Biden was the least objectionable of all those 27 people, which I think, in some ways, yeah, he's least objectionable.
There were a
And
couple
older.
of other people who didn't gain any traction. I think were less objectionable than Biden. The former governor of Montana, and the congressman from Ohio. But these guys got like half a point. But they were definitely like, a guy who could win Montana as a Democrat is going to be pretty moderate.
But I think it's less about position, about their political positions, and more about, I've said this before, more about power, more about the connection to the Democratic Party organization. And none of those folks is more connected to the Democratic organization than Biden.
Sure.
And that's consistent with observations, right?
But Bloomberg, they immediately criticized him for lowering crime in New York City.
Yep.
Everything he did well doesn't fit their agenda.
Right. So I think we're going to see that, and it's unfortunate. It's really unfortunate. And we've seen that throughout this whole 2020 thing with riots and stuff. I posted a posting on Ricochet recently where I just said, I'm an engineer. I don't know how our legal system works. And I don't understand how all these people rioting and so forth, or all these this voter fraud, election fraud, there are no arrests. I just don't understand it.
There were lots of arrests. The prosecutors decided not to prosecute.
I don't even think there were arrests. Like for the case of the 7 or so people in Georgia with the false water leak, water main break, and getting people out, and we have them on videotape. We have them on 6 different camera angles.
Yep.
Stealing votes, and
okay. I thought you meant the rioters. Sorry.
Well, both cases. I mean, in the case of the rioters, we have these people rioting, and we don't see them being arrested. So we have the folks engaged in election fraud on video. They're not being arrested. We have the rioters engaged in rioting, burning stuff. They're not being arrested. And so I'm wondering how that works. And perhaps it's completely up to the district attorney to decide whether you can make arrests or prosecute. And it's at a whim, and which means if they're politically connected, they can do all sorts of stuff.
It's true.
And we have no control over it. I mean, we can have oodles of laws, and we do at the federal, state, local level, and nobody reads them. Right? There's too many to read.
That was something that came up in the Michigan hearings, the first Michigan Senate hearings about the election, and they had this Democrat was grilling this person who was like the former, like we call them deputy ministers here, but the top civil servant in the Secretary of State office for Michigan, and she had retired. And they're like, the Republicans have been controlling the state for so long. How come they haven't fixed all these elections issues? It's like, we can pass all the laws you want in Detroit, but if the cops will not arrest or the prosecutors won't prosecute them, it doesn't matter. We are dealing with and she's like, I was in the office for 29 years. We've never had an honest election in Detroit in all 29 years. And if you go in there and try to clean it out, you're just going to have all these people protesting that you big evil white people are coming in and arresting and harassing black people. And this one woman was a big, beautiful black woman too. So she's like, you want to, this is the problem here. We have this terrible situation in Detroit and we can't do anything to fix it.
Right.
No one has the political will to do it.
Yeah. So it seems to me that the laws are being passed just for ammunition for the selective enforcement, and that's pretty weird. And maybe I'm wrong. Maybe there's some other thing going on. Maybe there's some other mechanism at work.
Well, there is one.
But to me, this is a flaw in the whole system.
It's not a flaw in the whole system, but the problem is that the Republican and conservatives have given up control of all the small, minor stuff. Now it's coming back a little bit, and that's why you're seeing things like Florida and Texas and other places where you're having like some success. But I was watching one guy talk about it, and he's like, my district in my county in Florida is 62% regular turnout for Republican. But you know who controls all the election machinery? Democrats. And they do it because no Republicans run against them. No one goes and gets these jobs. And there's like, that's the problem with like the entire United States is in lots of places, people, conservatives want to work, so they go out and get paying jobs, but there's plenty of places that you can go. Like Don, you could probably take over your local little accounting office if you wanted to. It's just like no one knows that they have to go out and take over these positions. They haven't realized the Republican parties have abrogated all their duties to the Democrats, and then they're shocked when they steal elections.
Well, it's certainly very much the case where I live. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Anyways, me and Don are talking a lot here. So what about you, Vance? What do you think?
Yeah. Sorry about taking over the show here. We're here for you.
You know, it is, like you said, passing the laws don't mean anything unless you enforce them.
Yep.
And you look at our immigration, we have all these laws, and no one argues to change them. They just say we're not going to do that anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You did see in Arizona where they created they stopped illegal immigration in Arizona, and how they do it? They went after all the employers. They didn't go after the immigrants. They just went up all those guys driving their trucks to the Home Depots to pick up migrant workers, and they went up to the guy in the truck and said, "Okay, and we want to see green cards for every one of these guys." And the guy's like, "I don't have their green cards." Well, here's your $1,000 fine for each guy in the back of your truck that you don't have documents on.
Yeah, I just started a new job. I had to fill out an I-9 and show 2 forms of ID.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I'm natural born. Been here for 50-something years.
Yep. But yeah.
Oh, that reminds me. Okay. Well, what do you do, man? What's your profession?
Oh, it's boring number crunching type stuff. A lot of spreadsheets, databases, dealing with telecom and costs, telecom billing.
Anything going on in that field?
What's that?
Anything going on in that field that's interesting, or?
No.
Well, hey, it says here you went to
foreign stuff is always big with VAT and all that nonsense.
So I have one question looking at your bio you provided. Why were you in the Soviet Union in 1990?
Yeah.
You just happened to be there right before the fall of a certain coup. You were just happened to be there. What was going on with that?
Yeah, no, I leave and the country collapses. So. But yeah, I saw an ad in the magazine. It was like International Peace Walk. I think the people were probably from Berkeley or something who founded it, but they did marches in the Soviet Union, and this one was in Kazakhstan, and it went to their nuclear testing site. And it just seemed a little interesting, something you wouldn't normally get a chance to do. You know, this is the evil empire. Let's see it from the inside. So I signed up. I went. It was like a 3-week trip, and we got to stay in people's houses, and you really saw the Soviets, like, you know, personally. So it was really interesting. A lot of the things we heard about that, all the propaganda we would hear, was pretty much true. I was talking to one guy who was kind of embarrassed to tell me his brother like started his own little underground newspaper and ended up getting sent to Siberia. Like, they really do that? He was like all embarrassed, and I'm like, you know, that guy'd be a hero to Americans, you know.
Such a cliche, but it's true.
Yeah, and just it was interesting to see because people were so friendly to me and to the Americans, but amongst each other, you could tell they didn't trust each other because it was all the government sort of control. And there was one gentleman we met who was supposedly American. So I talked to him a bunch, and after I left, I was talking to a woman I met there, and she was like, you know, I see him around town. He speaks fluent Russian now, when he said he didn't speak any Russian when we were there. And then when she came to visit me a couple of years later after the breakdown, he, out of the blue, calls me up. It's like, hey, you ever talk to Svetlana? I'm like, no, never. She's in the room with me. I'm like, that was a little odd. Definitely
Probably the local KGB.
KGB or something like that. And it was also like when the coup happened, I remember calling her and just like, I'm like, what's going on there? And all of a sudden the phone goes dead. So I call back and I'm like, what's going on? She's like, oh, don't talk about that. You'll just get cut off again. It was interesting to see, they just assumed their calls were being monitored. But I couldn't comprehend that until, you know, Snowden told us what the NSA is doing. But
Right.
so it was, you know, I remember going to a store and there was nothing on the shelf. So there was no bread line, but there was no bread. So it was.
Wasn't there a story about that? When was it? Not Gorbachev, but one of the Soviet high-up people, the one with the drinking problem. What's his
You
name?
mean every one of them?
Or,
No, okay.
Boris
Anyway,
Yeltsin?
yeah, I think it's Boris Yeltsin.
Okay.
I think one of them was coming. Yeah, I think it was Boris Yeltsin came over to the United States for a tour of NASA and the space program, working together, and they gave him in this tour. Or after it was done, they stopped by a local grocery store for some reason, and he got to see the grocery store with the shelves chock full of produce and meat, and everything. And apparently it blew him away. It said, first off, he didn't believe it. He said, I want to see another one.
Yep.
And he said, another one. Wow, it's kind of similar. And he said, when news about this comes back to the Soviet Union, we're sunk. And it was a wonderful little story. I guess I'll have to blip it in there somewhere.
yeah. And another thing when you were there, I mean, when you went to people's apartments, say, the rooms and all that, you know, that was theirs. They decorated, it was nice. But the common areas, like the hallways and stuff, since no one owned it, no one cared.
Mm-hmm.
So I went to, someone was on the 4th floor. There's a walk up, you had to go upstairs, and all the light bulbs were missing because people stole them. So they're really, you know, without ownership, you don't have a reason to care. You know, there's no co-op, the government owns a building, you just have your little apartment.
Similar story.
You really see where free markets work and socialism will never work.
Yeah, a similar story to Don's is I have one by a writer named Steve Kopkin, who was in the Soviet Union during the fall and befriended people like Gorbachev and all the senior leadership. And after the fall, he brings them to New York City, and he takes them to like the Chinese food district, where, you know, it's like block after block after block of Chinese food restaurants. And he's just walking down the street with the Gorbachev and the former deputy head of the Soviet Union. And they're just a gop, and they're like, where are all the bureaucrats to manage all this stuff? And he's like, what do you mean? Like, well, clearly you must have office buildings just full of apparatchiks organizing all these restaurants. It must be like, you must have 500,000 people running all the committees. And he's like, there are no committees. They're all owned by people who do all the work themselves. It's like, just blew their minds. And that was the problem with a lot of the Soviet Union, was that it was like, in order to organize everything, you had to have 15 people around the table talking about it.
So how long were you in the Soviet Union?
About 3 weeks.
Oh, okay.
And then I did go back to visit once after the fall of the Soviet Union. And it was interesting. Then the stores had food, but a lot of people couldn't afford it. And one person, I met a man from India, and coming from New Jersey, seeing an Indian there, it was like, oh, I'm back home. And he was telling me he was there for business. And he's like, the woman who cleans his apartment is a medical doctor. because when they fell, they still kept medicine as part of government run. So she made more money, you know, cleaning toilets and vacuuming carpets than she did as a doctor.
Crazy.
It's just bad systems make.
Yeah, the stories of the system are just numerous. There's the one about all the houses that were sitting unfinished, that constructed a area of just a lot of houses, community, and the houses were all unfinished because they didn't have nails for the roof.
Mhm.
And the reason was that the people in charge, you know, decided how many nails need to be manufactured, and the individual companies manufacturing nails discovered that, well, they spec it by the pound, and large nails are much easier for us to manufacture than little nails. So, you know, 100 pounds of large nails, easy. Let's, you know, so everybody made large. It was easy for all the companies to make larger nails, and so there was a shortage of small nails for putting in roof tiles.
Don't worry, I'm sure that none of this is going to be happening to any of your countries near your states near you when with the new government regulations coming down. I don't think anything bad like that will happen anywhere. My picture.
Yeah, I know. Growing up, you know, in the Cold War and all, you just everyone knew that socialism, communism is bad. But today, people are definitely looking at it like, hey, maybe we could do this.
Well, it was not true communism, so it doesn't count.
Yes, no, true communism has never been tried.
Yeah,
right. Yeah, the way I approach that sort of thing when somebody is that, well, okay, let's say that true communism has never been tried. Let's say that's over here. This is the true communism. Let's say we're over here. Now, the last communisms that all failed with lots of people dying were like here, 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 and here. My question is, how do you get from here to there, assuming it exists? How do you get from here to there without getting into these other troubled areas? And even if you do get here, how do you stay here without drifting to one of those other areas? And I think that's a pretty good argument.
Yeah, I mean, it denies human nature. You know, people.
Well, that's because all these different groups are fundamentally utopian, and then they think they can do what everyone else has done, make it happen. So, anyways, I noticed also in your bio you mentioned that you got to vote for the first time in 1984 for some, and of course I take it you voted for Mondale because you're so excited for him.
No, I did vote for Reagan, and I was enthusiastic about it. Like I said, and this year I was enthusiastic about Trump, but he did a good job. I was not so enthusiastic in 2016, but he proved himself, and well, maybe not to others. But in between, I'd say all my votes were, I was voting against Obama, I was voting against Clinton, against, it's rare that a politician gets me excited. And that's it.
Well, what did you like most about Trump?
Just he accomplished a lot. I mean, I think cutting corporate taxes was huge. That really was what spurred the economy. I like a lot of the pro-life. Yeah, I'm a Christian and all, and I know he may not come across as a Christian, but he said a lot of right things.
Yeah, well, I mean, he went to the March for Life.
Yeah, stand up
in person.
I mean, that's, you know, because I know when he was first running and everyone's like, oh, he's a reality show star. But I grew up in New York area, so he was always in the paper. He was a builder. He was a construction guy. He was not a reality show star. So I knew he was not just a TV personality, not just.
That's the least important thing he's done.
Yeah, that he could get things done.
When you're changing the skyline of cities,
Yeah.
You know,
Mhm.
Yeah, it's-
the reality show is nothing compared to that.
no, so I understand people not liking his personality and all that, but
You're not electing person. You're electing a person for effectiveness, not necessarily for their personality. Who cares
Yeah.
if they're a nice person, as long as they get what you want done.
don't trust that any of them are all that nice.
Well, I don't think that I don't think that was serious, because let's look at Joe Biden's personality, you know,
Mhm.
or Hillary Clinton's personality.
Yeah, she's-
Really,
She,
this is a low bar.
wait, Hillary has a personality?
Uh, So I mean, no one can tell me Trump's personality is any worse than those two.
No.
I don't recall Trump ever threatening to beat up someone for disagreeing with him.
Yeah. Take it outside. And
Mhm.
he didn't look that impressive when he was younger. And now he's 78. I don't think
Mhm.
worry about going stepping outside.
Anyone else notice that his foot is no longer broken?
What is Biden?
Yeah. Does anyone believe his foot was actually broken?
Oh. No, but it could have been, I don't know, sprained.
Yeah.
I don't know.
He just tripped over his dog and he was like, I can't go out anywhere. I'm like, really? You're not gonna do anything? Help?
Yeah,
Oh, was that the reason for not doing a debate or something? I'm fogged. There's so much has
No, it's
happened.
more.
just
I think
don't
it
remember.
happened more after the election, but it meant that he wasn't really doing anything during the aftermath of the election.
Okay.
Well, everyone was kind of watching the election contest. He was just kind of off, nowhere, not doing anything. So
wasn't he tripped over his dog, but then was in the bathroom, and then
yep.
it was a very changing, confusing story.
That can happen. That can happen.
Mhm.
You even have a dog.
So I see you and I believe Jim Garrity are the only New York Jet fans left in the world.
I suppose. Yeah. It's not an easy path. My wife says, "What are you doing?" She grew up, my father-in-law had season tickets to the Giants, and they occasionally win every now and then. Yeah, I got into it back in the early 80s when they were sort of competitive, and now it's easy now because after week 4, you don't really have to be as invested in the season anymore because they're eliminated already. But they did get a new coach. We'll see where this goes. But I've learned not to be optimistic, much like through politics.
Yes, it's true.
Here in New Jersey don't win, so. I do wonder how this election would have turned out if we didn't have this coronavirus.
Well, I think Trump would have won 40 states. They wouldn't have been able to do any of the election shenanigans that they were able to do. The Democrats and their people were able to change the rules on.
True, but the Dominion machines would still be used, right?
Yeah, but the Dominion machines are kind of a red herring. That was not the problem. It was like Democrats stuffing ballot boxes in the wee hours of the morning. Dominion machines just recounted how many stuffed ballots there were.
Yeah, but they also switched votes from Trump.
That doesn't seem to be. Okay. I can't see where any of that seems to have actually bared out anywhere. I mean, there was a couple places that seem to have, they said, human error, and it's just like the total. Anytime they did a hand count, they got the same amount of ballots. Whether or not they did any signature audit ballots, they didn't do any of that. They didn't do any that. There was election workers were coming through and saying these ballots all look the same. Well, you're not being told to see if they're all the same. We just want to make sure they all add up. And so they always seem to, when they did hand recounts, they always add it up correctly. So.
Well, that is actually an important issue when you're designing a system. Who is responsible for determining whether the signatures are right or match? And should it be the people in this part of the counting, or should be someone over here. We should have some centralized place that decides if the signatures match. So I'm almost I almost dismiss that. If they have, you know, we're not checking the matching here, we're checking it over here, the signature matching here, we're checking it over here. And we don't want people without skills in that area.
Well, in
Making
most
decisions
normal
here.
countries,
So I can see that. I can see that.
I understand it. But first off, in most normal countries, you don't allow mail-in balloting, period,
Right.
because it's full of election fraud.
Lots.
And no one, you don't have this in pretty much any other country in the world doesn't allow this. I mean, in Canada, the way it works, if you can't make it on election day, you go to the elections office and you vote there.
Mhm.
Like we have a writ day period. It's like a month, or to say the longest was 10 weeks, and that didn't really work out for the Conservative Party when they tried to do a 10-week election because people ran out of money. But any day of the writ, except for election day, you can go down to your local office and you vote in the special ballot box, and that's usually the first one that's counted.
But I think as far as the Dominion machines and vote swapping goes, we saw them. We saw the remnants. We saw the fact that the Trump counts tallies went down. They swapped so many votes from Trump to Biden that it overcame the number of votes that were coming in.
I keep saying, like,
I think that's.
It does not seem to bear out because they did hand recounts, and those recounts added up to roughly the same amount of votes that they did. They sometimes lost a few thousand votes, but not enough to significantly change the election. However, where you had Dominion voting machines in Arizona, when they did a signature audit match on 2,500 ballots, and then the judge shut it down, the Democrat signature match ballot expert said 11% of the signatures didn't match, and the Republicans said 6%. And if that had been true across the entire amount of votes, it would have given Trump the state. But as soon as the judge heard that, he said, "Oh, well, I'm changing the rules," and shut down the election, the thing. So that seemed to be more the thing. I understand a lot of people think Dominion is, and there's a lot of stuff, but it seems to be the Dominion machines kind of verified the system, but because you weren't able to do signature matches, or you weren't allowed to do any kind of independent audits, like the Georgia recounts. They didn't allow any of the Republicans to come in and watch the recounts.
That's besides that, yeah.
Sure. And in
those are all big
Pennsylvania,
things.
they said, the Supreme Court there said, you can, as long as you're in the building, you're observing the process. I've scrutinized the processes. I'm there staring over the shoulders of the person taking the ballots. I was once in a party election. I had 4 scrutineers from 4 different candidates. And if a name and a signature on the, and we use photo ID in Canada. I don't know how you guys get away with that in the States. That's outrageous that no one has photo ID. If that guy's photo ID, I had a guy come up and he's like, "Well, my name is I'm Jack," and that's how he signed in his membership card. But on his ID, it was required his full name, which was Giacomo. And one of the guys, the ballot challengers, challenged it. He's like, and I said, "You have to go over to the special line," and the huge special line because of all the challenging that was happening that day. But I've been in and in Detroit, if a Republican challenged a ballot, the cops arrested them.
Yeah.
And hauled them out. And then Bill Barr says, "Well, I didn't watch that."
Well, do recall, this is the only country where a death certificate is valid voter ID.
Sorry, your friend's coming over.
Yeah, this was
Yeah, so
crazy the way they changed all the rules because of the COVID.
Yeah, that's what happened. So if we never
But
had,
I still think the Dominion machines, the way
hey, look, get rid of the Dominion machines. Everything should be hand counted, balloted. There's no reason to have freaking voting machines. Everyone can
but the thing
take
is,
their pencil, they fill out all their ballots, and people can count that.
But here's the issue. The way the machines were reporting the votes was as the total number of votes and a ratio, a fraction, as for this candidate, that candidate, that candidate. And no computer software engineer would do that intentionally. That is in computer software, fractions, like decimals, are inherently inaccurate. And because base 2 repeating decimals are like 0.333 in decimals. So no one would ever, no computer science, no software engineer would ever represent the data like that, ever, because integers are so clean and unmistakable. You would have this many vote count for candidate 1, this count for candidate 2, and so forth. This was a crazy system, totally devised for fraud.
Oh yeah, there's certainly something to be said for that. But the other thing is, apparently all the Dominion machines scanned every ballot. And when they signed the deal in Georgia, the Raffensperger, the guy who refused to allow any audits to go through, said in his signing of the contract, well, if there's ever any problems, we can just print off every single ballot because they'll be scanned into the machines and we can all visually count them. And then as soon as they said, okay, why don't we visually print off all these ballots and visually count them? He's like, no. And as me and C Writer said in our podcast about this, he said, you know, and for a bunch of people who say they didn't steal an election, they sure actually are acting like a bunch of people have stolen an election.
It sounds like the steamed hams episode of The Simpsons.
Yeah.
I don't know if you know it.
Well, there's so many episodes of The Simpsons.
The steamed hams bit is very popular amongst the young people these days.
Okay. Yeah. But you said in your thing here, Vance, that you're most interested in talking about COVID and all the lockdowns and how some people made the most of it. How do you mean by people have made the most of it?
Well, I've seen, first, I remember when it first started hitting before they had the lockdown, like my wife was saying, a beauty parlor in town, they started making it so you couldn't show up until your appointment was due. You had to wear a mask. And then, so people put their own provisions in because they want to stay safe. And then the government shut them down anyway for months. And then when they reopened, it was with the same exact rules they had made up on their own.
Mm-hmm.
And then after they closed motor vehicles for several months.
Mm-hmm.
And then when they reopened, you had like 4 months worth of people renewing licenses and all. Mm-hmm. I tried to go to renew mine. I went like an hour and a half before the place opened, and that wasn't early enough. The line had 300 people, mm-hmm. and cut it off at 250. So there's people. I saw a kid in our town was in the news. He started a business waiting online. He'd go at 4 a.m. with his chair, and then you come. He take an appointment, then you show up at 8 or whatever when the place opens, and you pay him. And so businesses like that, I saw, just some of the distilleries making hand sanitizer. I remember the first time I saw that in the liquor store. I'm like, and there's it looked like tequila bottle, but it was like hand sanitizer. And I think the FDA is trying to crack down on them now.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
But, people, you put obstacles up, the free market's going to find a way to do things.
Mm-hmm. And
now everyone makes masks. And if you'll notice, nothing fits on my head. I'm bigger than usual, but I'm not like freakishly circus big. I mean, so the other day I went to church to bring my kids to a youth group. I put this on, it pops. Mm-hmm. So then they get something at church. They had ones from the government. See, it's got CDC stuff on it, and they're cloth, so it won't break, but it almost rips my ears off if I try to put it on. And this is like the same material you make underwear out of. I don't know, is that good or not? I know the paper ones in the box, it says not for medical use, so it looks like a surgical mask, but it's not. So the whole mask thing is getting crazy. I know.
Just use panties. That always works.
Yeah, I have a bandana, but they said, "Oh, that's not good." Whatever. Usually not near people, just like go to the supermarket or something. And then once people have masks on, there's no social distancing. Everyone's.
Yeah, I know. That was always got me. Like, why? One of the reasons why I was one of the last people to wear a mask when going to the grocery store is because as soon as people got put on their mask, they were all crowding together. But if they saw me without a mask, they all stayed their 6 feet away.
But don't they yell? The COVID. Like a murderer?
Fortunately, in Canada, I've never had that experience here in Ontario.
You need some old Jersey ladies. And then the other extreme, you got the people who are like, well, if you wear a mask, you're basically a communist. It's like, no, maybe you don't want to get sick. I mean, there's places where it makes sense, but then wearing a mask is like virtue signaling. Like you see,
yeah, it is.
Balcony with his wife, and they're both wearing masks. It's like, just you live together. There's no one else there. You're outside. You're safe. It's like,
well, a friend of mine, or a former friend of mine, and she went a little crazy, and so I had to. But she was a nurse, and she was like telling me, like, I hate all these mask mandates. They're so stupid. And she's like, you really understand that I had to do like a 10-hour course on the safety of masks before we were allowed to use them. And you know how it goes is that you go into there's like an chamber before you go into the hospital room. So you put on your mask there, you go in, you interact with one patient, then you go back out to that ante room, you take off your mask and you throw it away. That's how masks work. The fact that who's washing these masks? No one's washing any of these masks. They're constantly wearing them. You put them on, you take them off. Like it's germ city here. If you know anything about how these things work, and yet we're all, it's like,
yeah, a lot of it's for show. I don't know.
It's like TSA at the airport. If we find the bomb in the middle of the TSA line, that's not good. The bomb's going to go off and kill like 300 people because we got everyone jammed into this small space at the airport. Yeah. Like taking out the TSA line would get you more damage than you would ever do by blowing up an airplane.
That's true. Everyone said no one can run away because you have to take your shoes off. Well, because of one shoe bomber, and he didn't even do well.
Yeah.
True.
Because he had a fuse, right? And everyone blew out the match when he tried to light it.
Well, the TSA thing, I've always said, just get rid of the whole thing and just have a policy of cops fly for free. And it solves the problem. And it costs you effectively nothing.
Well, what is it? One guy said,
plans, I think you'd be okay. Then you could decide, hey, they got really tough restrictions. Maybe it's safer. Whatever.
I remember one guy saying that you don't need all this TSA. All you have to do is is everyone getting on the airplane, you give them a ball-peen hammer. And if anyone does something crazy, there's 100 guys with a hammer in hand.
Yeah. Good idea.
Check out.
So we're probably coming to the end of our time here.
Yeah. So you mentioned one last thing. You were speculating. Now that Trump is out of office, you were thinking to yourself, "What now? What do you think of his legacy?" I mean, I'm very impressed. No new wars.
No wars. Strong economy. Like I said, we had the pandemic, but certainly not.
There might be random thumbs coming up behind you.
Yeah, my dog's crawling around. I don't know. But yeah, I think with time, people will look back at what actually happened, and I think Trump will be remembered well.
Oh yeah.
Oh, yeah,
as soon as there's another Republican in, all these media types will be saying, "Don't you remember the good old days under Donald Trump? We could make a deal with that guy. Sure, he had mad tweets, but President Cruz is so much worse."
They hated Reagan. They hated Bush. It's always
Trump could make you laugh.
The worst.
Yeah.
And now, what do you think will happen to President Biden? Doesn't even like saying it.
It's I think I need to put a betting pool on Ricochet, how long we think he's going to last. And we'll figure out the odds ratios based on commenters saying how long they think before it's President Kamala.
Yeah, and you know, with midterms, things can sway with Congress.
Oh, yeah. No. It looks good for the midterms. Redistricting alone, Reid takes the House.
But how often do we undo what they do?
Yeah.
We still have Obamacare. We still.
Well, you got to remember, like Biden's. Obama came in with a supermajority in the Senate. Practically, he had a much bigger House majority. The progressives in the House really do hate Nancy Pelosi. Remember Ruth Bader Ginsburg RBG watch? Everyone was worried about when she died and what ended up happening. What do we think is going to happen when, like, Steny Hoyer's how old? Nancy Pelosi's how old? Mitch McConnell's how old? Biden himself? Like, it's a watch to see who's the next one of these people who dies in office. And what happens when suddenly, like, the Republicans at least have been bringing up some of the younger talents that fill up the roles, like Paul Ryan was speaker. Kevin McCarthy will likely be the next speaker. He's in his early 50s. Like, the Democrats are just run by all these geriatrics.
Yeah, I was surprised
stand up.
With Pelosi. I thought 2 years ago they sort of said, like, okay, we'll do it now, but they wanted to make a change for the future. But yeah,
well, somebody on Steve Bannon's show suggested a possible approach is that if in 2022 you get a House majority, you can then impeach Biden, impeach Kamala, and get Trump to be Speaker of the House.
It's a terrible idea. and it's not for the reasons
and then
you
he
think.
Would take.
Because I remember this being a discussion back in 2014, and people were talking to Newt Gingrich, and they were saying, "Hey, what would happen if they got rid of McCarthy, because they did get rid of him and replaced him with what's his name?" But he said, "Would you take it on?" He's like, "No, I wouldn't." And the reason is because as a speaker, basically, unless you're a sitting member of the House, there's a whole bunch of House stuff that you can only go to as a House member. And if you're a speaker, you want to go to those meetings. You don't want to be barred from the caucus meetings.
You do it quickly.
You don't want to be, unless you're a sitting member of the House, you do not want to be speaker, because you won't be able to do anything, and you will have a lot less influence and power and control over your caucus than you would think. So you would just make the majority leader the speaker. That's what would happen.
Does Pelosi know this? I mean,
I'm sure she does. But it's just like that's the reason why he suggested you don't want to bring an outsider, because they were talking about bringing Colin Powell. They were talking about bringing him. They're talking about all of these things because you don't have to be speaker. But he's like, unless you're a member of the House, there's no reason to be speaker. So it's fun. I think Trump winning in 2024 is a much more reasonable and likely scenario.
Not unless you fix the voting.
He's got remember, he can just say, "I'm going to create a third party unless you let me run." And
we're talking about that in another conversation on Ricochet.
Yeah. So, like, you don't want, he's in the perfect position. He's in the same position the first Teddy Roosevelt was. He could really screw up the Republicans if he wants to. And someone else recently pointed out to me, like, the Whigs went away in one term. Right. The Whigs dissolved, and you suddenly had the Republican Party. If there's enough people pissed off, you could dissolve the Republican Party and replace it with the Patriot Party or whatever.
Yeah. Normally, third party is unstable. I mentioned this somewhere else. The incentives are all aligned for bad things to happen, because if two of the parties want to do something good and one of the parties wants to do something bad, the two parties split the vote and the bad wins. So it's really bad news. It's really dangerous. But on the other hand, a Trump-driven third party would be pretty powerful and would drain the GOP of a large fraction of their people.
Mm.
So it would do that. Could win that way, and the rest would probably, jump off back to the Democratic Party, because they're probably more mercenaries than in it for the political reasons.
Yeah.
On
That being
the third
said,
hand,
okay.
on the third hand, it's so much more easier to get into a party and redirect it, get your people in there and redirect it, than it is to start a party from scratch. Because all the infrastructure is there. All you have to do is repilot it. And the Dems learned that. If very many
and I think you're seeing that in the
many
Republican Party.
organizations,
Like, people forget 106 Congress people voted to support the Trump and the 12 senators. So, I mean, the Senate kind of, because it came down to a Senate decision, but the fact is the majority of the Republican congressmen voted to support the president. You only had 10 people.
For which is this?
For the contestation of the election. You had over 100 people, including the Senate, the congressional minority leader, Kevin McCarthy, vote in favor of Trump. You had 12 senators vote in favor of Trump. Now, the riot, the disruption, derailed that and made that not work out. But the fact is, you still have that. You have all the state party. You had 47 states were contesting at the Supreme Court. So all the state parties voted to support the president. You just got to realize how much of the Washington people, especially in the Senate, are just so out of touch with the mainstream. I saw people who were talking about Pat Toomey running for Pennsylvania governor, and I'm like, he can't do that. In his when he voted against the contestation, he threw his entire party under the bus because he called them traitors. The state parties running these places. What's her name? Cheney's kid. She's been already, Liz Cheney has already been censured, and apparently the Montana Republican Party has the ability to recall. They're just starting to gear up to recall her. She's not going to win her next thing. Her political career is finished in elected wise, unless you get another, the Republican Party has already changed, and it's just a matter of time for those people who are smart, like Hawley and Cruz, to see the way things are going. And I think you already saw that. The optics on the Capitol situation were bad, but I think we're going to see in the next 4 years. I mean, you got these people coming up from the state parties that are going to replace the leadership, and it's just taking a while. And I think Trump has a good shot in running in 2024. I mean, he's the most popular president to leave office in a long time, since probably Reagan. Maybe Bill. I'm not too sure.
Well, like I said, unless you fix the voting, it's not going to happen.
Well, that's the thing. Remember in 2018, in Congress, the Republicans in California, all these seats that were long-held Republican Californian seats suddenly went to the Democrats, and I remember watching the GOP because of ballot harvesting, and I remember the GOP chairman at the time saying, "Oh, very good. We'll see you in 2 years." And in 2020, all those seats went back to the Republicans, from what I could tell.
But those were all really, really, I documented this actually.
Yeah.
Those are all really, in the Ricochet post, those are all really, really close races where you had a lot of the population who didn't vote. So with minimal work, you could coerce the extra votes from that group.
Right. So that's the thing.
It was very easy.
The Democrats had to expose them in order to take this election. They had to expose themselves so hard and change the rules in ways that expose their situation. And now the state governments, who are almost all Republican controlled, except for, I don't know what the hell is happening in Georgia, but Pennsylvania, Arizona, Michigan, they might not be able to fix Detroit, but they'll fix everywhere else. And Wisconsin are all controlled by Republicans except for the governorships. And they're all looking at what happened, and they're going to fix the rules. And they know what was exposed, and they are planning. And maybe they don't pull it off, but I have a feeling these people have every incentive to try and fix the situations. And
I don't think so. It wouldn't have gotten this way if they did. I think there's I think it's a much more difficult problem,
Oh, well, we'll see.
but we shall see.
Anyways, you got to hear us talking a bit more than Vance, but I think Vance won't like to hear what we had to say.
Sure.
We screwed up here, didn't we?
Well, you're always welcome.
Jabber, jabber.
Anyways, we've been talking for nearly an hour, so I think we should end the show here. Do you have something you want to, some sort of positive note to send us out on, Vance?
Oh, we have President Biden,
Mm-hmm.
our first woman vice president. Isn't that exciting?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
How much can they really screw up your life, though?
Yeah, that's
Hopefully
true.
we don't find that. I think the system was made to survive bad people, but government does so much more than it used to.
Mm-hmm.
And I know in the past you used to hear people saying like, "Oh, well, the left and the right, they all want the same thing, they just have different views on how to get there."
Mm-hmm.
I don't believe that anymore. I think we are that far separated now.
Okay.
I agree.
Well, on that hopeful note, this has been Land of Confusion. I already have another person lined up for next week, so that's unusual for us to have 3 candidate and people willing to meet with us in a row without me having to beg and borrow and cheat like a Democrat. So we'll see how it goes. Signing off. Thanks for watching, guys.
Take care.
Bye-bye.